Yo, what's up, y'all? It's your boy, Oaghaji, aka Oaghaji, and I'm back with another video. Today is going to be another rant, and it's going to be on the Western fighting game tournament scene once again. As some of y'all already know, that I've talked about this topic several times, but I just want to hit this home, and I might do another topic on this in the future. Um, it's basically me. I want to talk about the fact that the Western fighting game tournament scene needs a hard reset. It needs a hard reboot badly. Because, like I said many times before, especially on my Twitter, that the Western fighting game tournament scene has gone downhill and it keeps getting worse. You know what I'm saying? And the reason why I say the Western fighting game tournament scene is because it's the one fighting game tournament scene that has a bad reputation, you know what I'm saying? It's the one fighting game tournament scene that puts down certain fighting games like Arcana Heart and Dead or Alive. You know what I'm saying? And Melty Blood. You know what I'm saying? Pretty much any fighting game that isn't Street Fighter or Tekken or Mortal Kombat. You know what I'm saying? But even then, those games were put down a bit by cats that will put down any fighting game that isn't Street Fighter or any fighting game that's made by that isn't made by Capcom. You know what I'm saying? Um, and it's like I said, it's the most well and it's the only fighting game tournament scene that is pandering to the moral standards and puritans, especially the ones on the liberal side of things, you know what I'm saying? So that's why the Western fighting game tournament scene has gone downhill. It's not because of the esports shit. No, the reason why the Western fighting game tournament scene has gone downhill is because it decided to pander to the Puritans and moral grandstanders, especially ones on the liberal side of things, and political correctness as a whole. You know what I mean? That that's why it, and especially consider the fact that some cats that engage in that moral grandstanding stuff have some skeletons in the closet. And this is definitely true in the Western Smash Brothers tournament scene. And the reason why I say the Western Smash Brothers tournament scene is because the Smash Brothers tournament scenes in Japan, for example, doesn't have that problem to my knowledge. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, there's that. Another issue with the Western fighting game tournament scene is their unwillingness to adapt. You know what I'm saying? That's another issue outside of the political and moral pandering. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, the political pandering and moral pandering is definitely one of the problems within the Western fighting game tournament scene right now. But that's like problem number two or three at best. Or I should say problem number two. Problem number one is their unwillingness to adapt. You know, they'll complain about how certain characters are broken, whether it's in Street Fighter 4 or Street Fighter 5, Street Fighter 6, or even, Third Strike, Tekken 5 or Tekken 6 or Tekken 7 or Tekken 8. You know what I'm saying? Or, let's say like a Marvel's Capcom 1 or Marvel's Capcom 2 or Marvel's Capcom 3. You know what I'm saying? They'll complain about that instead of adapting, you know what I'm saying? And it's ridiculous. You know what I'm saying? And not to mention, like I said before, about how the Western fighting game tournament scene downplays any fighting game that isn't made by Capcom. that ain't Street Fighter. You know what I'm saying? And even to a certain extent, fighting games that aren't Tekken or Mortal Kombat. For example, Arcana Heart, Dead or Alive, and Melty Blood. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, some cats within the Western fighting game tournament scene they'll downplay those games and put down tournament players that enjoy and embrace the games for what they are while playing them competitively. You know what I'm saying? And that's one of the biggest issues. You know what I'm saying? And and that and that's a big problem. Like the fighting game tournament scenes in Asia, Africa, Latin America, and South America, they don't have these issues. You know what I'm saying? In fact, they're more focused on enjoying and embracing the games for what they are while playing the games competitively and honing their skills and adapting. You know, they're not complaining about broken characters. Instead, they're adapting and getting good at the game and getting good at their combos, their BMBs, their zoning, their trap, you know, and their footsies and all and other important stuff when it comes to playing fighting games competitively in a tournament. You know what I'm saying? So and they also know how to have fun while competing in these tournaments. You know what I'm saying? Like for example, in Japan, you know what I'm saying? They play a lot of the old school fighting games, and I'm not just talking about the fighting games by Capcom, but also by SNK, Sega, and all that. You know what I'm saying? They enjoy games like Virtual Fighter, Melty Blood, Arcana Heart, Dead or Alive, you know, Street Fighter, Guilty Gear, Gato Densetsu, aka Fatal Fury, Ryoko no Ken, aka Art of Fighting, Samurai Spirits, aka Samurai Showdown, Bakumatsu Roman Geku no Kenshi, aka The Last Blade. All these fighting games they enjoy, and they enjoy and embrace these fighting games for what they are while playing them competitively, and they're focused on adapting. And you know what I'm saying? And that's the thing. And people might say that the Western fighting game tournament scene went downhill because of esports. No, that's not the reason at all. No, the real reason is because again, they decide to pander to Puritans and moral grandstanders, especially the ones on the liberal side of things. Hell, I wouldn't be surprised if they decided to pander to the Puritans and moral grandstanders on the conservative side of things. You know what I'm saying? If they go so basically going from one extreme into the other, and we don't need that at all. So the Western fighting game tournament scene, it needs a hard reset. It needs to go back into what made the Western fighting game tournament scene, you know, enjoyable to be a part of. You know what I'm saying? And, you know, which is a balance of fun and competition. We need to get back into having that. You know what I'm saying? When it comes to the Western fighting game tournament scene, we don't have to worry about the fighting game tournament scenes in Asia, Africa, Latin America, South America, etc., because they know how to balance fun and competition. That's why it's best to support those those fighting game tournament scenes in those regions. You know what I'm saying? And people like cats will bring up, oh, what, like for example, with Dead or Alive having, you know, being streamed on television, tournaments and all that. Yeah. Well, Dead or Alive is not the first one to have that televised. You know what I'm saying? Other five games had, you know, tournaments that were televised as well. For example, there was, you know, Tekken 3. There's also that. You know, not to discredit, you know, Dead or Alive 4, for example, but you know, it's not the only one. You know, it's just me trying to add on to the conversation. You know, just to let y'all know. Yeah, and that whole situation with Dead or Alive 6 with the core value stuff, yeah, that's what really ruined the reputation of the Western fighting game tournament scene. You know, that's one of the main things out, you know, like I said, because again, the moral pandering and political pandering, yeah, that you know what I'm saying. And as well as the unwillingness to adapt and holding their skills and getting good. That's another issue. And when you look back at the Western fighting game tournament scene from back in the days in like the 90s and early 2000s and early 2010s, the Western fighting game scene didn't really have these problems at all. This was until like around 2015, 2016, with the whole culture war shit going on and the whole election thing. That's what really where the Western fighting game tournament scene was starting to go downhill at that point. So overall, I think that the Western fighting game tournament scene needs a hard reset. And the only way to do that is to take notes from the fighting game tournament scenes from Asia, Africa, Latin America, etc. And which is to balance fun and competition, as well as focus on getting good and honing their skills to be the best fighting game player in that particular scene. You know what I'm saying? And also, the Western fighting game tournament scene needs to stop putting down downplaying fighting games that aren't Street Fighter, like or any other Capcom fighting game or Tekken or Mortal Kombat. The Western fighting game needs to embrace fighting games like Dead or Alive that have the sexualized femme fatale badasses. Games like Arcana Heart and Melty Blood that have the anime and manga inspired influence, you know what I'm saying, and air dashers and all that stuff, as well as Guilty Gear, you know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? In other words, be open minded to other fighting games outside of Street Fighter and Tekken and Mortal Kombat. You know what I'm saying? And not downplay certain fighting games because of their lot, just because they have breast physics and all that type of stuff. Especially for the fact that a lot of cats don't know that Dead or Alive, it has deep gameplay mechanics, just like Virtual Fighter and Tekken, and it doesn't need to remove the sexualized femme fatale badasses to prove that. I mean, Japan was able to play the Dead or Alive, and Japan and Taiwan were able to play the Dead or Alive games competitively and enjoy and embrace those games for what they are. So there's no excuse. So there's no excuse for the Western fighting game tournament scene to do the same with games like Dead or Alive, Arcana Heart, Melty Blood, etc. You get me? So yeah, like I said, the Western fighting game tournament scene, it needs a hard reset. It needs to be grassroots again and start from scratch, and which is to balance competition and fun and honing their skills and adaptability. So that's all I gotta say about this topic for now. I might talk about this more in the near future. So yeah. With all that being said, this is your boy, Oaghaji, aka Oaghaji, signing out. Peace.